Welcome back to Midnight Whispers. Don't forget to subscribe, turn off the lights, and let's step into a new story. I used to wake up every night a few minutes after midnight because the old wall clock in my bedroom clicked louder when the house went quiet. The routine never changed because the heat shut off, the refrigerator stopped humming, and the silence became sharp enough to notice details. I slept alone in a small rented house at the edge of town where traffic disappeared after 11 and neighbors minded their business. My bedroom door stayed open because the latch never aligned correctly, and fixing it felt less urgent than rent. On the first night it happened, I woke up facing the wall with my back to the room and assumed the weight on the mattress was my imagination. The mattress dipped near my feet as if someone had sat down carefully instead of collapsing onto it. I stayed still because moving would mean admitting I was awake, and I wanted to understand what was happening first. The pressure did not increase, and it did not disappear, which ruled out the usual half-asleep muscle twitch explanation. I listened for breathing, fabric movement, or any sound that would tell me a person was there. The only sound was the clock ticking and my phone buzzing faintly from a low battery alert. I reached my hand backward without turning and touched nothing but cold air above the blanket. The mattress still dipped, which made no sense when my hand found no leg or body. I rolled onto my back slowly so I could see the edge of the bed clearly. The room looked exactly the same as it had before I went to sleep, with clothes on the chair and a glass of water on the dresser. The mattress remained compressed near the foot of the bed, as if invisible weight pressed down. I turned on the bedside lamp, expecting the pressure to vanish instantly. The light came on, and the mattress did not rise. I leaned forward and pressed my hand into the dent, and it felt firm like someone resisting the pressure from below. I stood up and backed away because staying on the bed suddenly felt impractical. When I stepped away, the mattress slowly returned to its normal shape, as if the weight had finally been removed. I searched the room, the hallway, and the living room, finding doors locked and windows untouched. I checked the time and saw it was 12:12, which felt oddly specific. I wrote the incident off as a muscle spasm or a strange sleep-related illusion and went back to bed. The next night, the same thing happened at almost the exact same time. This time, I was awake before it happened because my phone vibrated again from the charger slipping loose. I watched the mattress dip near my feet while fully conscious and with both eyes open. I recorded a video on my phone pointed at the bed, but the low light showed nothing except darkness and grain. I touched the mattress again and felt the same resistance, like a knee or thigh pushing back. I spoke out loud and said hello, which sounded unreasonable even to me. Nothing answered, and the pressure stayed steady. I turned on the light again, and once more, nothing changed. I slept on the couch that night with every light on in the house. The third night, set up a small camera on a shelf facing the bed before going to sleep. I left the lamp off because I wanted to see if light affected the event. I woke up to the mattress dipping again and forced myself not to move. I looked at the camera and saw its red indicator blinking steadily. I reached for my phone and noted the time as 12:13. The pressure stayed for almost a full minute before lifting slowly and evenly. I did not turn on the light this time, and I did not get out of bed. I waited until morning and checked the camera footage immediately. The video showed the mattress compressing clearly near my feet with no visible cause. The compression lasted 58 seconds and then reversed gradually. There were no glitches, no audio spikes, and no movement anywhere else in the room. I called my landlord and asked if anyone had access to the house, and he said no one had entered for months. I checked carbon monoxide levels and found nothing abnormal. I began sleeping with my shoes on and my phone unlocked beside me. By the fourth night, I expected it, and expectation did not make it easier to watch. The mattress dipped again, exactly the same way at the same time. I spoke again, louder this time, and said I knew someone was there. The pressure shifted slightly, like a small adjustment, before settling again. I stayed still and watched the clock until the pressure lifted. That was the first time it shifted, and that detail stayed with me long after the bed returned to normal. After 4 nights, I stopped pretending it was a sleep issue and started documenting everything with timestamps and notes. I placed pressure sensors under the mattress using a borrowed setup from a friend who worked in physical therapy. The sensors recorded weight distribution changes and logged them automatically. On the 5th night, I watched the readings spike at 12:14 with a clear, localized increase near the foot of the bed. The sensors estimated the weight as roughly 60 pounds, which eliminated many explanations. The pressure lasted exactly 1 minute and then dropped cleanly to 0. I did not sleep after that and instead replayed the data until sunrise. I moved the bed slightly away from the wall and cleared everything from underneath it the next day. That night, the pressure returned exactly the same way and in the same place relative to my body. I moved the sensors again to confirm it was not a calibration issue. The data repeated perfectly, down to the timing. I called a friend and asked them to stay over without explaining why. They slept on the couch while I stayed in the bedroom with the camera running. At 12:15, the mattress dipped again. I turned on the lamp immediately so my friend could see it too. The mattress was visibly compressed, and my friend froze in the doorway, staring at it. They reached out and pressed down where the dent was, then pulled their hand back quickly. They said it felt like pressing against a warm knee. The pressure stayed for the full minute while we both watched. When it lifted, my friend stepped back and said nothing for a long time. They left before morning and did not stay over again. I reviewed the footage with them later, and neither of us could explain it. I contacted a structural engineer to inspect the floor, but he found no issues. I slept during the day and stayed awake at night to avoid being in the bed. When I finally lay down again, the pressure returned regardless of whether I was asleep or awake. On the 9th night, something changed in a way I did not expect. The mattress dipped closer to my waist instead of my feet. The pressure felt heavier and less careful, like someone sitting down without hesitation. I turned on the light immediately and saw the mattress clearly compressed beside me. I grabbed my phone and called emergency services, not knowing what else to do. While the call connected, the pressure shifted again, closer to my hip. The operator asked if someone was in the house, and I said I did not know. The pressure lifted suddenly, faster than before, as if whatever caused it stood up quickly. Officers arrived and searched the house thoroughly, finding no one. They suggested I stay elsewhere for a few nights. I packed a bag and stayed with my sister across town. The first night away, nothing happened, and I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The second night, the same pressure appeared on the guest bed at exactly 12:16. I sat up instantly and watched the mattress dip beside me. I turned on the light and felt the dent with my hand, confirming it was real again. I checked the time and laughed once, not because it was funny, but because denial finally felt pointless. I asked my sister to watch the bed with me the next night. At 12:16, the mattress dipped again in front of both of us. She cried and backed out of the room. The pressure stayed longer this time, nearly 2 minutes before lifting. I realized then it followed me, not the house. I checked my medical records and remembered a surgery I had years ago after a car accident. I requested archived hospital footage tied to my recovery room, which took weeks to obtain. When I finally watched it, I saw myself asleep in a hospital bed just after midnight. A nurse sat on the edge of the bed to check my vitals and paused there quietly. The timestamp read 12:16. The nurse stood up after nearly 2 minutes and left the room. I compared the pressure data from my bed to the hospital bed frame specifications and found they matched within a small margin. I contacted the hospital and learned the nurse had been fired years ago for sleeping during shifts. I stopped sleeping in beds after that and started using a reclining chair. The pressure never returned once I stopped lying flat. I no longer wake up after midnight, and the clock ticks no longer bother me. I kept the chair positioned upright every night and documented weeks of uninterrupted sleep to confirm the pattern had truly changed. The absence of pressure convinced me the position mattered more than the location or the time. I began researching how the body records physical memory during trauma and long hospital stays. Studies showed that repeated physical contact during unconscious states can create conditioned bodily responses without emotional triggers. I returned to the hospital archives and requested more footage from the weeks following my surgery. over several nights of recordings. I saw the same nurse repeatedly sit on the edge of my bed at nearly the same time. She did not always perform a task when she sat down. Sometimes she simply rested there, leaning forward, motionless. The timestamps varied by only a few minutes, always just after midnight. The duration matched the pressure episodes I experienced years later, almost exactly. I noticed something else that unsettled me more than the sitting itself. In several clips, my leg shifted slightly, and the nurse adjusted her position in response, as if reacting to me. That detail suggested interaction, not coincidence. I consulted a neurologist and showed them the footage and my data logs. They explained that the brain can reproduce physical sensations tied to past states when the body re-enters similar conditions. Lying flat, alone, and inactive after midnight recreated the conditions of my recovery room. My brain, according to them, was replaying a physical imprint rather than an emotional memory. That explanation fit the evidence, but did not explain the exact weight measurement. I asked how the body could reproduce such a precise sensation. The neurologist admitted that the precision was unusual, but not impossible. I decided to test the theory under controlled conditions. I lay flat on a medical examination table with sensors attached while awake. Nothing happened. I dimmed the lights and waited past midnight. At 12:17, the sensors spiked briefly, then settled. The pressure was faint but measurable. It was the first time it happened without a mattress. That result disturbed the neurologist enough to end the session early. I returned home and avoided lying flat entirely. Months passed without incident, and I started to relax. Then one night, exhausted, I fell asleep on the couch lying fully flat. I woke at 12:18 to the familiar pressure at my calves. The couch cushion compressed visibly. I stood up immediately, and the pressure vanished. That confirmed the pattern beyond doubt. I realized the sensation was not external, but internally generated with physical output. My body was recreating the exact conditions of that nurse sitting beside me. The idea that memory could manifest as force unsettled me deeply. I disposed of all beds in my home and replaced them with angled furniture. I stopped watching the footage, but the images stayed clear in my mind. I wondered why that particular nurse and not others. Hospital records showed she was assigned to me more often than anyone else. She had worked double shifts during that period. The incident report from her termination noted repeated episodes of falling asleep beside patients. The phrasing caught my attention. She did not fall asleep near the bed. She fell asleep sitting on it. I imagined her weight settling repeatedly into the same spot night after night. That repetition seemed key. I began to understand that the sensation was not a visitor, but a loop. The realization made it easier to live with, but harder to forget. I started sharing my experience anonymously in medical forums to see if others had experienced something similar. A few people responded with accounts of recurring physical sensations tied to hospital stays. None described pressure visible to others or recorded by sensors. That distinction isolated my case further. I began to suspect my recovery period had involved more than rest and observation. I requested my full medical chart, including handwritten notes. One margin note caught my attention because it was written differently than the rest. It mentioned prolonged bedside monitoring due to irregular readings during sleep. The nurse's initials appeared next to it repeatedly. I cross-referenced the dates and saw they matched the nights she sat beside me. I wondered if she had been monitoring me manually while resting. That would explain the repeated contact. I contacted the hospital again and asked about patient outcomes during her shifts. They refused to share details, but confirmed no fatalities occurred under her care. That information did not bring relief. I realized my body might have associated survival with that physical presence. The pressure could have been recorded as a stabilizing factor. That reframed the experience in an unexpected way. I had never considered the sensation might be protective rather than threatening. To test this idea, I monitored my vital signs during one controlled exposure. I lay flat briefly at 12:19 with sensors attached and my phone ready. The pressure appeared faintly, and my heart rate slowed slightly instead of increasing. The pressure faded as soon as I sat up. The data showed stabilization rather than distress. That result conflicted with my fear-based interpretation. I reviewed early footage again and noticed my breathing often steadied when the nurse sat down. The pattern suggested regulation rather than intrusion. I still did not want the sensation to return, but understanding its origin reduced its power. I adjusted my routines to avoid recreating the conditions entirely. I traveled for work and slept in reclined positions without issue. Hotels posed no problem as long as I avoided lying flat. I stopped setting alarms near midnight and removed clocks from my bedroom. Time awareness seemed to amplify anticipation. Over a year passed without a full episode. Then one night during a medical scan, I had to lie flat after midnight. The pressure returned briefly and then stopped when the scan ended. The technician noticed nothing unusual. That confirmed the trigger conclusively. I accepted that the sensation would surface only when my body believed it was necessary. I stopped trying to eliminate it and focused on avoiding the trigger instead. The experience lost its intensity once it lost unpredictability. Still, I kept thinking about the nurse herself. I searched public records and found she had left the profession entirely. She now worked in a different field with no patient contact. That fact gave me a strange sense of closure. The loop belonged to my body now, not to her. I no longer viewed the sensation as someone sitting beside me. I understood it as my nervous system replaying a moment it associated with stability. That understanding did not make it pleasant, but it made it manageable. Years later, I was hospitalized briefly for an unrelated procedure. I informed the staff about my history and requested specific accommodations. They agreed to keep the bed slightly elevated at all times. The stay passed without incident. That success confirmed my control over the situation. I stopped thinking about it daily and allowed it to fade into the background of my life. Then one night at home, my child climbed into my bed after a bad dream. I stayed still to avoid waking them fully. At 12:20, I felt the mattress dip near my feet again. The pressure was light, but unmistakable. I froze, not wanting to alarm my child. The pressure remained steady for just under a minute. My child did not wake and showed no reaction. When it lifted, I carefully sat up and moved them to their own bed. That incident forced me to reevaluate my assumptions. I realized I had recreated the conditions unintentionally. I was lying flat, inactive, and monitoring someone else's stability. The parallel to the hospital room was exact. My body had entered the same role the nurse once occupied. That insight changed everything. The pressure was not someone sitting beside me. It was my body recreating the sensation of being watched over. By placing me in the watcher's position, the loop had inverted. I reviewed all past episodes and saw the pattern clearly for the first time. The pressure appeared when I was vulnerable or responsible for vulnerability. It was a learned response to caretaking states. The weight was not external or intrusive. It was a physical echo of vigilance. I stopped fearing the sensation entirely after that realization. I no longer avoided lying flat, but I remained aware of the trigger. The pressure never returned when I was alone and relaxed. It appeared only briefly during moments of responsibility. Understanding the function eliminated the mystery. The sensation was my nervous system marking a transition into watchfulness. It had never meant harm. It had meant stay alert. That conclusion resolved years of confusion in a single moment. I no longer record the time after midnight or monitor my bed for movement. I sleep normally and wake rested. The sensation has not returned in years because I no longer misinterpret its purpose. When I think back to those nights, I see them differently now. There was never someone entering my room. There was never an unknown presence sharing my bed. There was only my body replaying a pattern learned during recovery. The visible pressure was the physical expression of that learned response. The nurse did not follow me. The memory of being kept alive did. I share this story because it demonstrates how precisely the body remembers conditions tied to survival. The events were real, measurable, and repeatable. The conclusion is not comforting, but it is complete. Someone never sat on the edge of my bed after midnight. My body recreated the weight of vigilance when it believed it was necessary. Once I understood that, the nights became quiet again.